Hello, everybody, and welcome to our discussion of Chapter 10 of the textbook, which deals with proposals and formal reports. We're going to spend the first part of the discussion talking about proposals, both informal and formal proposals, but we'll focus most of our attention on the second part of the subject matter, which is formal reports, because you are engaged in the process of putting together a formal report, and we want to tie the subject matter of this lesson with the process that you are engaged in right now. So let's deal first with the subject of proposals. Proposals are written offers to solve problems, provide services, sell equipment. They are they are a way in which business can be solicited. They are a way in which a person can either at the request of the receiver or without a request from the receiver, a sender can introduce its business and can seek to gain favor from the receiver. There also are internal proposals. If your business organization is large enough, you may need to file proposals with various people in management to justify certain types of expenses, to justify certain types of changes to procedures. Proposals in the organization, internal proposals, they can be more like recommendation reports. External proposals often are in response to what are known in the trade as RFPs, or requests for proposal. And you will have seen, or maybe you haven't yet, but you will see in the content folder for Chapter 10, I have posted a request for proposal that I received and my proposal in response to that request for proposal. Now, proposals generally come in two shades. Just as we talked a lot about formal and informal reports, proposals come in both informal and formal characteristics. Informal proposals tend to be shorter. They often can be done in the form of a letter, and they won't necessarily have all the bells and whistles that can go into a formal proposal. Now, the proposal that I have given you is, by and large, an informal proposal because, number one, it's in letter form. Number two, it's approximately, the proposal itself is probably about 6 or 7 pages, and then there are a fair number of documents attached at the end of the proposal. An informal proposal generally starts with an introduction, then has a statement of the background purpose. It might have a proposal plan, a schedule. It would usually cover staffing, cover budget, cover some type of request for conclusion or authorization on the part of the party making the proposal. And if you look at the proposal that I have posted, we cover almost all of this information. We cover the introduction. We cover the background purpose, the background problem, what our client was looking for, what issue our client was trying to solve. We don't generally get too much into schedules in a lot of the proposals, although oftentimes proposals, if schedules are required, they will be stated in the request for proposals. So the schedule is very often dictated by the receiver, by the requirements that they've laid out in their RFP. You'll see a substantial discussion of staffing in the proposal the sample proposal that I've given you. you'll see some discussion of budget. This proposal was generally to be done on an hourly basis, on the basis of agreed rates that my firm has with this particular client. And then there was a sort of a conclusion, a wrap up. Um, there were certain issues that the client asked to have addressed in the RFP, and we did discuss those issues in the proposal. A formal proposal will have all of those requirements, all of those components, but there may be some additional components. A copy of the RFP might be attached to a formal proposal. There might be a letter of transmittal, because a formal proposal is not necessarily going to be set up in a letter format, as is the informal proposal, particularly an informal proposal like the one that I gave you as a sample. Formal proposals can be very long. They could be hundreds of pages long, depending on the degree of technical information that needs to be provided, information about budgeting and staffing and scheduling. So you may need to put an abstract, a statement of a summary statement about what is contained in the proposal. You'd most likely have a title page and possibly a table of contents. If your proposal is particularly long, you will want to provide a table of contents, the same way that you have to put a table of contents into your report. You might put, if there are charts, if there are figures, if there are illustrations in your proposal, you might want to put a table of those as well, and tie that together with the table of contents. You'll still have the body, you'll still have the statement of background purpose, you'll still have the proposal plan and schedule, budgeting and staffing, authorization request, and you may have appendices. The proposal that I gave you as a sample, although it's an informal proposal, it does have appendices. It has several different appendices, including rate schedules and resumes. But in a more formal proposal, the appendices could be quite voluminous and they could be quite large, depending on how complex they need to be. Now, what do you put into the various parts of a proposal? And we'll look at the informal proposal, because most of the time you will be working with informal proposals. Formal proposals depend, unless you are in a particular type of industry or particular type of business, formal proposals are much less frequently prepared than are informal proposals. So in the introduction to your informal proposal, you do want to talk about why the proposal is being written. You want to talk about the writer's qualifications, the qualifications of the entity that is submitting the proposal, and you want to come up with some sort of hook that sort of grabs the receiver's attention and sort of hooks the receiver in and makes the receiver want to continue reading the proposal, makes the receiver believe that the proposal is indeed going to be responsive to the request for proposal. Now, your book identifies certain types of hooks. I would add to the list that's included in the textbook and included in the PowerPoint slide, I would include that statements of experience and expertise can be very helpful, particularly if you're dealing in the area where I'm most familiar, which is writing proposals to provide legal services. And I believe the same would apply to anyone who is trying to provide certain types of professional services, accounting services, maybe consultancy services, architectural, engineering. Anytime that your experience and expertise is going to set you apart from somebody else, you want to get that out in the introduction, and that can be the hook that brings in your receiver and captures your receiver's attention. Another thing that's helpful, and you'll see that I use this hook in the proposal that I've given you as a sample, is you talk about your experience with the receiver. If you are submitting a proposal to someone for whom you've done work in the past, at least if you've done, maybe not for that particular person, but for the entity that the person represents, you want to get that out in the introduction as well, because that can be the hook. That can show that you understand this particular client, you understand this particular customer, you understand their needs, you understand the way they operate, and if you've been successful in a project for a client, you want to make sure the person reading this proposal knows that, because success breeds familiarity, and you want your receiver to believe that you are going to be equally successful in this new effort should you be engaged for that. Now, after you've done written your introduction, you then need to write your background statement, your statement of the problem, the purpose. That's more. It's not as important in a proposal, because usually you are particularly in an external proposal, you're responding to an RFP in most instances. You're not necessarily coming in cold. You could be sending an unsolicited proposal for something that you've observed that this particular client might need. And in that case, you would describe the problem that you've perceived, and you would describe how you believe that you could solve that problem. If you're doing an internal proposal, you're most likely you're proposing to address something in the organization. There may be some situation in the organization that you believe needs to be resolved. In that case, you would definitely want to state the problem and state the purpose of the proposal. In the external proposal, you're responding to the RFP, you address the RFP, you identify the RFP, and you summarize what you believe the RFP is asking for, what you believe the client wants. And you'll see that I do that in the proposal that I gave you. I summarize what I believe the FDIC is looking for in the proposal that I ultimately do submit to them and did submit to them. You want to, and you'll see in the solicited external proposal, you want to be able to quote the RFP or paraphrase the RFP where appropriate. And you'll see that I do that. If you compare the RFP, the request for proposal that I received from the FDIC, to the proposal that I filed with the FDIC, you can see that there are places where I do use language either directly from the RFP or language similar to the RFP to make it clear, either explicitly or subtly, that I've read the RFP, I understand the RFP. And that's what you want to do when you're preparing a proposal and you're responding to an RFP. You want the receiver to believe that you've read the RFP, that you know what the receiver is looking for, or at least you have a good idea of what the receiver is looking for, and that you believe that you have the expertise, the experience, the understanding to provide the services or the product that the receiver is expecting you to be able to provide. Once you've done that, then you need to include your proposal plan schedule. And that's a lot of that will be very much dependent upon what is in the RFP. The RFP that I responded to, that I've given you the response to, didn't really have much in the way of a schedule. It did have a plan as to what this project entailed, what it was anticipated that that my firm would need to be doing for the FDIC, and I was responsible for at least giving some preliminary statement about how I thought we would tackle this issue and how I thought that we would respond to the request for assistance with this documentation project. If the RFP requires it, definitely you need to commit to a schedule. You need to commit to a plan of implementation. But a lot of this will depend on what is in the RFP, what is in the request, what has the receiver said needs to be included in the proposal. And if your receiver tells you that you need to have X, Y, and Z in your proposal is most likely not going to be read as seriously as it would if you don't respond to the points that the receiver has specifically asked to have included. Staffing is another critical point in RFPs, and you'll see that we spend in the proposal that we submitted to the FDIC in response to the FDIC's RFP, and that I've given you as a sample. You'll see that we spend a fair amount of time on staffing because in many instances, particularly when you're dealing with professional services, not so much when you're trying to sell a product, because staffing is not usually as much an issue with providing a product, but where you are providing personal services, it is critical that the receiver be comfortable with the proposed staffing, because the staffing is at the heart of the provision of services. So you need to show what professionals will be involved, what level of expertise will the professionals have, what support staff will be available for the professionals. If a client requests a specific type of services, if the client's looking for consultancy services and they need someone who can consult on securities issuance and tax issues, you need to make sure that you have that you're able to provide that level of expertise, and that you're able to provide people who address all the particular needs of that client as expressed in the RFP. If you can't, if there are gaps in your experience and your expertise, and the client is asking you to address that particular subject in your proposal, you need to have a backup plan. You need to be able to tell the client in the proposal how you're going to address the fact that you might not have a particular aspect of the requested services in-house, but you are going to address that through subcontracting, through joint venturing, in some way. You have to show the client how you're going to fill in the gap. If you're not able to provide all the necessary staffing that the client believes is necessary for the project, you're not necessarily going to get the project. And it's important. I mean, you want to be honest you never want to lie in a proposal. You want to be honest, but you also have to take into account how you may, if you can't meet a particular requirement, then you need to determine how you are going to go about meeting that particular need for the client. You then have to deal with issues of budgeting. You have to deal with issues of requests for authorization. Budgeting can become a particularly sticky issue in a proposal. I try, when I'm writing proposals, I realize that a proposal is a contract, and I realize sometimes that a client wants a stated fixed fee in a proposal, or a statement of a range of fee in the proposal. But you have to be careful that you don't box yourself in. I always try to draft with a certain amount of wiggle room. I provide discussion of assumptions, that our budget is based on the certain assumptions. And if those assumptions don't prove to be correct, I reserve the right to come back and request a budget amendment, or a request, or that the quoted fee will not necessarily be the final fee. So you have to think very carefully about your budgeting, any type of budgeting discussion. Clients more and more are requiring budgets in these types of proposals, whether it's for professional services or whether it's for the provision of a particular product. Clients, the receivers, the parties issuing proposals are expecting more or less hard and fast answers, particularly with respect to budgeting. And so these issues have to be dealt with very carefully. It's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing here in the communications process. We're not dealing with the hard and fast, but as you're drafting these types of proposals, these types of, whether it's a formal proposal or an informal proposal, you have to try very hard not to box yourself into a position that you may not be able to achieve at the end of the day.